Hey, it's Sparky, Fifer, 1250 AM, The Fan, hanging out here with my guy, special guest, filling in for Ryan Horvath today, who's out sick. He is Jeff Nowak, WWL, New Orleans Saints sideline reporter. You can follow Jeff on Twitter at Jeff_Nowak. Also, there's a podcast inside the Black and Gold podcast as well. You want to check that out too. And it's funny, I reached out to him. He said, Kurt and Long. I'm assuming this is a Packer podcast. Yeah, the Kurt reference probably gave it away a little bit. Okay, so let's start. There is so much I want to talk to you about because there's so many different angles on this from a Packer fan perspective. But I want to start with just the basic perspective of Mr. Carr at quarterback for the Saints and how he was welcomed, I guess, by Saints fans. Were they excited when they got him? Were they like, well, we're not going to go much farther than we went before. He's not that good of a quarterback. How was the general reception of Carr? And how is it now they've seen him play preseason and a couple weeks into the regular season?
I would say cautiously optimistic. You know, this is a fan base, and I'm sure the Packers are kind of in a similar situation where it's like you have this star quarterback for so long, you forget what life is like without one. And you know, you went through 2 years, you tried Jameis Winston. It worked at points. You know, you started that year 5-2 in 2021, got hurt. Last year, you started 1-1, got hurt. And then it kind of felt like they needed to reset the deck a little bit at quarterback. You needed to bring in a veteran, a guy who, you know, is going to command that group. And I think that's something that Derek Carr has. And it's what, you know, from the team perspective, you could see that immediately. And you could see the team has rallied around him very quickly. He's the leader of that room. There's no question about it. From a fan base, it's like, okay, so how after 2 years of kind of toiling in mediocrity, right? So you go 9-8, you miss the playoffs. Thanks the Rams blowing that lead and week 18 there. No bitterness about that. And then last year you go 7-10. They were in it. You know, they had a chance. If they beat the Bucs in week 13, don't blow that game. They're right there. They might win the division at 8-9 even because the Bucs, I believe, won it at 8-9. And so, you know, I think this fan base is just, you know, they're ready to root for a winner, right? Like they're ready to just be happy with the playoffs again. And so I think that's why bringing in Derek Carr was a smart move because, you know, I just think this team has to prove that it can win without Sean Payton, without Drew Brees, that it can that the entire Saints era was not just that. And I think we've seen that through 2 weeks. This defense is good enough to carry this team. And if the offense can do its job, you know, you'll see a lot of wins. You'll see a lot of ugly wins, but you'll see a lot of wins as long as the offense can step up late in games the way it has weeks 1 and week 2 and close things out, even if it got ugly in the first half. And so, you know, Derek, I don't think has played that well. And I think he would be the first one to admit that through 2 weeks. I would grade him at a C. From what I would have been expecting. And that grade is raised by the fact that he has come out in the last two fourth quarters and really sealed those games with big throws. But, you know, I think if you're a team and you're looking at it and you're like, okay, we have struggled on offense. We struggled to protect the quarterback, we struggled to run the ball. We struggled to do just about everything in the first halves of those games, but you're 2-0. And you know things will get better. You know the protection will get better. You know Derek Carr will get more and more comfortable with the pass catchers. So I think the Saints are feeling really good, and the Saints fans are feeling really good about where they are right now.
It's interesting because you talk about the Packers. They clearly outplayed the Bears in week 1. They outplayed the Falcons through 3 quarters in week 2 for the most part, and then blew that game in the fourth quarter. Offense couldn't get a first down. Packers defense missing tackles all over the place. Now, again, people are going to miss Bijan Robinson all year. I get it. But you just can't because Arthur Smith just wants to, you know, run it down your throat at this point. What about the Saints running attack coming into this thing? Jamal Williams dinged up with the hamstring, which is very popular in the Packers camp right now. Everybody's down with hamstring injuries. So he's probably not going to play, it doesn't look like. Then, of course, you got Kamara, who's still on suspension, so he won't be out there. So what now for the New Orleans Saints at running back?
Yeah, so, I was on the sideline for that game this week, and I watched Jamal come off the field. He did not look like a guy who expected to go back in the game. He came out of the 10, he tested it out. Did not go well. He went back to the locker room, never came back in. I would be very surprised to see him out there. We haven't gotten the initial injury report yet, but I would be very surprised to see him back this week. And so, Alvin Kamara is still suspended. Dennis Allen tells us that they don't anticipate bringing anybody in. Like, Kareem Hunt signed with the Browns. There's not going to be a last-second running back infusion. The guys that are there are going to be the guys that figure it out. And so, to me, I think you're looking at another heavy dose of Tony Jones. He's a guy who the Saints know pretty well. He came up with the Saints, ended up with Seattle, then with Denver in the preseason, came back. He's on the practice squad now. He's been a practice squad elevation these last 2 weeks. It'll be interesting to see if they sign him to the active roster before this game. But he had 2 touchdowns. He scored. People act like those short yardage touchdowns don't matter. Well, they matter when you don't get them on first down, because if you lose 2-3 yards, then you're in second down, then you're in a world of hurt, and it becomes a lot more difficult. He was able to get 2 touchdowns on first down, and that really sealed that game. So I think he endeared himself to this coaching staff for that game. So I think he's going to be the main kind of workhorse. And then, as you saw in this game, Taysom Hill, 9 carries, 75 yards. He's going to be a major part of that rushing attack, whether it's as the quarterback taking snaps or getting the ball from Derek Carr. So I think that's going to be kind of your 1-2 punch in this game.
We'll get to Taysom Hill. I have lots of thoughts on that dude. But what about Kendre Miller? Is that the rookie running back who didn't play this last week and they think he'll play this week?
Yeah, so Kendre, he probably could have played. He was healthy enough to play. DEA told us that they just didn't feel like it was fair to the rookie to send him out there and have him take significant snaps after really not getting a full day of practice. He was limited. Sure. So I expect he'll be a full go this week and will be out there. So you will see some of Kendre Miller. I just don't think they trust him in the pass protection part of the game. So he's going to be limited. And when you have a guy like that, what you want to avoid is just, every time he's on the field, it's a run, right? Like because you don't trust him in pass protection, so you don't want to be tipping your hand. So I think his involvement will be limited. He's going to be out there. He might get a few snaps, but I think he's going to be the backup, and you're going to see primarily Tony Jones and Taysom Hill. But they do like Kendre, and he can catch the ball. He can be useful. So, maybe if they get him out there early and he flashes, he earns himself some more snaps. I would guess between 12 to 25 snaps maximum for him.
Jeff Nowak, WWL New Orleans Saints sideline reporter, Curd and Long. Download it on your Odyssey app, or you download your favorite podcast ad. Obviously, always streaming these bad boys live on the Odyssey Sports YouTube page as well. You can always go back and watch it later if you'd like and see what Jeff Nowak actually looks like. Maybe you'll be surprised. Jeff, okay, let's talk a little bit about Taysom Hill, because I don't know. If you got pictures on Sean Payton, what the relationship is, I have no idea what the deal is. They gave that dude stupid money. God bless him for getting stupid money. But it's interesting because I've been kind of going through your tweets, kind of looking at everything. And you're defending the fact that, they had these designed runs for him. He's picking up significant yards when they do. Quit calling it a gimmick and so forth. And I get it. And I understand it. But if you're an opposing defense, aren't at some point you're thinking to yourself, no, just no. If he beats us throwing the ball when he comes in, fine. But otherwise, you almost kind of got to walk everybody up and just play for the run of him running the football more than you do of him throwing. Now, again, remember, he started in Green Bay with the Packers. So I get it. Like, I liked him. I got down with him in training camp and all that when he was younger. He was old even when he was younger with the Packers.
Yeah, I mean, he's 31 now.
Exactly, right. So now I'm sitting there watching this, and I'm like, well, Payton's gone. He's going to be gone. Nope, still there. And they're using him the same way. And I don't know if that bothers Carr or not. I think it would piss me off if I was a starting quarterback and I get pulled out for Taysom Hill at this point, because it's really the only example around the NFL that this is actually happening. Hell, it happened to Drew Brees, for God's sakes. That was insanity to me. Your thoughts on Taysom Hill and this whole thing? Because from an outsider perspective, it seems nuts.
It does, but at the same time, it's like, are you really gaining that much from having Derek Carr on there's a cat here, having Derek Carr on the field to hand the ball off? Like he threw the ball 36 times in that game. It's not like he's hurting for pass attempts. Right. So in that sense, like I don't know what it's taking away from it, and especially in this game, like you're not typically going to see 9 Taysom Hill carries.
What's the cat's name, Jeff?
That was a product of losing your running back. And so you had to find a way. But there's a stat out there, like when Taysom Hill carries the ball more than 7 times in the last 2 years, they're like 7-1 or 8-1 or something like that. Like there's a correlation between Taysom Hill being effective and this team winning games. To me, it's more like, okay, what works? What is working right now? And in some games, they're going to be able to stop Taysom. They're going to bottle it up. And you're going to have to decide, okay, are we really going to put him in there to throw the ball? He has done it. It does work when it happens and you're really just pushed up and he's able to just find someone. I think in that Seahawks game last year, he had 4 touchdowns. One was a passing touchdown to Adam Troutman. So he can hurt you that way. That's always a thing that you have to at least account for. But to me, it's like, if it's working, then you keep doing it, right? And it's always like, okay, I'm going to keep running this play in this QB power set until they prove they can stop it. You got into the fourth quarter of that game. The Panthers never proved they could stop it. He was averaging 8 yards a carry. And in games like that, it's not a gimmick. It is an effective piece of your offense. Now, where I think you get into trouble is you're trying to force feed Taysom the ball because you're like, no, this is part of our offense. We're going to run it. Just like if they're playing the 2 deep shell and they're taking away passes over the top, are you going to keep throwing it deep? No, you have to take the passes underneath. Where if they're not playing a defense that is capable of stopping you with that extra blocker, which is the benefit of having Taysom on the field, you get you get that extra player who can block, right, as opposed to a quarterback who's handing the ball off and then getting the heck out of the way. That's where you gain it. And for a team that, I think has struggled to pass protect at this point, any way you can establish the run, you don't have Alvin Kamara, you don't have Jamal Williams, having him in there bowling people over is no small thing. It's nothing to scoff at. And then there's also the element that every team in the NFL needs guys who are willing to play special teams. They need good athletes, good players who are willing to go out there and make a tackle, stick their nose in. He's the personal protector on the punt unit, so it's always a fake waiting to happen. He makes special teams tackles. He does everything. And so for a team that's just trying to find an extra edge, he makes sense. And one of the reasons you don't see it around the league is there's only one Taysom Hill. And I don't think there are other guys. There are players on rosters across the league who are capable of doing what he's doing, of taking snaps and running the plays that he does. So yeah, I mean, I understand why it's kind of strange to people. And yes, he has been paid a good sum of money, and that was more about Sean Payton really projecting him as the next Steve Young, which right, that was always kind of silly. Mm-hmm. But in the role that he has embraced and is willing to do, it's a selfless role. He gets none of the credit, but he does all of the dirty work. I think it's an advantage. And I don't, when he's averaging 8 yards a carry, I don't understand how you can sit there and call it a gimmick. I mean,
so let me ask you this. So are the people calling it a gimmick Saints fans, or is it fans from other teams that follow you when, the Saints are playing their team, and then you hear it from those fans more than from the actual Saints fans?
Yeah, it's a lot of well, you're taking your quarterback off the field to do this. And it's like, yeah, well, you were handing the ball off anyway. So what do you really,
right?
But it's, the weird ones are when the quarterback actually runs out to the side of the field and pretends he's going to catch a pass because, you don't gain that extra blocker. But it's a scenario where it's like you put Taysom Hill in that personnel, and the defense always has to have it in the back of their mind. He could be getting the ball. And the more you have to make the defense plan for, the better off you are. You want them to be confused. You want them to be on the back foot. The people who are complaining about it, in my opinion, are primarily fantasy football people. Right? They're the Chris Olave fantasy owner who thought they had that touchdown, and then it got called back. And then all of a sudden it's Taysom Hill taking it down to the 2 and Tony Jones Jr. punching it in. 2 guys that no one started. Right?
That's correct. Yes.
Like, I think that's where you kind of get that real vitriol of like, no, this is dumb. Stop doing this. It's like, it works. Why would, as long as Derek Carr's okay with it, the Saints are okay with it. And from what we have understood, it's not something that he is concerned about. Again, he threw the ball 36 times in that game.
Let's talk about wide receiver. You talked about Olave, stud, no disagreement. Let's talk about Mike Thomas. Didn't play last year for the most part, right? So now he comes back this year, and I'm watching training camp reports, and he's trying to get his legs underneath him and try to get back to be the guy who he is. Then I see your video. He gets into it with a Panther player because he apparently, according to Dennis Allen, walked down the wrong tunnel. Okay. So anyways, so I don't think I believe that, but either way, so they get into their little shoving match or whatever. But how close is he to being the Mike Thomas that was that damn good back in the day? Or is he kind of a shell of himself at this point?
Well, so I think the reality is somewhere in the middle, right? Like that 2019, like you're not going to see Mike Thomas catch 150 passes in a season, right? Like, excuse me.
I get something to drink there, no doubt. Hopefully the cat didn't drink all that water.
Yeah, I think that's the cat hair coming at me. But yeah, you're not going to see him catch 150 passes in a season. And frankly, that's if you go back in the history of the NFL, when you look at guys who have those massive seasons, they tend to get hurt. When you have those crazy big workloads, look at Cooper Kupp now. Marvin Harrison, when he had that record-setting season, his next year he got hurt. I think Julio Jones, when he had his major season where he had, I think, 120 catches, he got hurt. So it's like that workload in and of itself makes it difficult for guys to maintain what they've been doing. That said, even if he is a shell of that 2019 version of himself, he is still a very effective football player. And what we've seen through 2 weeks, 6 catches, 7 catches, about 50 to 80 yards. Those are hard yards. Those are the chain moving yards that you need when you know you have weapons on the outside, like Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed. You also have a guy who can go in the middle of the field and battle as well as anybody to make catches. And while he's not going to get 15 targets a game like he was, those targets that he does get are in very important situations. You saw that deep pass to Shaheed that closed out the game against the Titans, a 16-15 win. Well, before that play, the catch that no one's going to talk about is 2nd and 12. He catches the ball, turns it into a 3rd and 6, a ball that probably no one else on this team catches because he's getting demolished as he gets to it. And so that's the type of player that you have right now. You don't have the dynamic 99 Madden rating Mike Thomas, but you do have a very strong physical receiver who's going to fight for footballs in contested environments. And that's what the Saints just didn't have last year. Chris Olave has worked on that. He's gotten a lot better. I think everyone saw that diving one-handed catch he had where he decided to spike the ball even though he wasn't touched. Thankfully, it went out of bounds. So he's gotten better in that environment. But, Mike Thomas, from just a physicality perspective, from a mentality perspective, he's an emotional leader of this team. I think everyone is better when he's out there. He's a valuable piece. But that's what he is, a piece of this offense. He is no longer the entire offense like he was back in 2019. And I think the team's better for that, if I'm being honest.
Go from one old guy to another guy, old guy, a fountain of youth guy, Jimmy Graham. How is that all playing out? Because we thought he was done in Green Bay. Watch him go to Chicago. Then we were convinced he was done. And then he has a big highlight or whatever. What was it? Preseason? I think he had a big highlight, or was it the first week of the regular season? I don't remember.
It was
but
the
either way,
finale.
Yeah, big highlight. And we're like, what the hell is going on in New Orleans? Where has that Jimmy Graham been? He was all fired up. So how much of a role has he played? Is he kind of relegated to player coach, or is he actually going to play a role on this team?
Yeah, he started riding bikes. That's apparently the fountain of youth for him. Is he started going on 100-mile bike rides, and that knee injury, which he said that knee injury really never healed. The one that he got in Seattle, he had a torn patella tendon or whatever. The same injury Victor Cruz had. It's a very difficult injury to come back from. He was back from it in like 10 months, but he never really got right. And so what he said was the year away from football, he started cycling a lot. It really helped his knee, and so he felt like he was able to come back. He did always want to come back and have another year with the Saints. So it's kind of working out for him. I'm not convinced right now that he is a productive piece of the 53-man roster in the sense of plays on the field. He did have that really nice touchdown. He had a couple contested catches in that preseason finale that I think cemented his spot on this roster. But through the first 2 games, the only on-field contribution you've seen is negative 10 yards because he had a holding penalty. He hasn't been targeted and obviously hasn't had any catches. I haven't seen him make any spectacular blocks. I haven't seen him draw any real attention.
How many snaps is he getting?
Yeah, I think he had 10 snaps this last game. And to me, right now, it seems like he's just an ornament. He is there as a novelty. And if that's the case, they went into this last game with 2 running backs, just 2. And your starting running back went down. And the only guy you had available, not including Taysom Hill, was a practice squad call-up in Tony Jones Jr. Would you not be better served with a 3rd running back who also plays special teams in the space of the, situational tight end who happens to be named Jimmy Graham and have his picture up all over the facility? I'm starting to lean the other way. It's a cool story. I'd love to see him catch a touchdown in the Superdome. That would be awesome. But that can't be a reason you keep a guy on a roster. So, maybe there is something. Maybe they incorporate him more this coming week and going forward. But as of right now, he's been a non-factor.
How has the protection been for Mr. Carr at quarterback through the first couple of weeks of the season? Because the Packers, from their perspective, they got some edge rushers now. And I don't know if Van Ness will play. He got hurt in the last game, but their rookie out of Iowa, 1st-round pick. But Rashawn Gary coming off of injury has looked really good the first couple of weeks. Preston Smith has been around. Ingabare showed some stuff last year. The kid out of South Carolina they drafted last year. looked good in preseason as well. Kenny Clark moves off of nose. That's really opened up TJ Slaton, get a push up the middle. They can produce a pass rush. Devontae White out of Georgia, they drafted last year. He's shown some stuff. Their front seven is a lot better than it's been over the last several years for sure at this point. So I'm curious to see what this offensive line for the Saints look like and whether or not the Packers can get home.
Yeah, in a word, suboptimal.
Okay,
it
good.
has not been great. It's been, I think one thing they have done well is gotten better, more effective throughout the course of a game, right? Like I think in a lot of instances, you're going to get caught with stuff you haven't seen before, especially when you're going against a young, like a young group, a group like this last game. There was a Hero Evero. They haven't really been able to scout him. They changed to a 3-4. And so you're going to see some games up front that you're not expecting and you get beat. If that's happening in the first quarter, I can accept it. If you look good in the first quarter and that's happening in the fourth quarter, that's a problem because that means you are getting beat throughout the game. And so what I have seen is the Saints have been good at scheming help at trouble spots, which right now that's been everywhere other than Ryan Ramczyk. James Hurst has struggled at left guard. He was left tackle last year. He's a veteran. Trevor Penning has struggled at left tackle. He's a young player. I think he took a step forward this week. He was probably the high point of the offensive line this week in terms of he got toasted week 1 and he seemed like he has a chance to be a solid left tackle in week 2. So that's good. Eric McCoy has struggled. Cesar Ruiz has struggled. So, that's something that has been a problem. And, it's one of those situations where I agree with you. I think the Packers front seven is very, very good, but I still think it's the third best front seven the Saints have faced because I think the Titans have a top 3 front seven and the Panthers are right up there too with Brian Burns and Derek Brown. So, at some point it might get a little easier, but that's the point of this game that I think is going to be important. You have to be able to establish the run with whoever is there. I don't know who it's going to be, but it's going to be a struggle. You can't give up on the run because then that allows these guys to just pin their ears back. So, yeah, I mean, that's going to be the X factor this week. It's going to be the X factor every week. Can you keep Derek Carr upright? And that's one of the other reasons that I don't understand the whole hatred of the Taysom Hill part of the offense, because at least when Taysom Hill is on the field, you're not worried about your quarterback getting teed off on.
True. Yeah.
and
true.
And so, it's something that they're going to have to figure out. We've seen the tight ends be virtually non-existent. People keep asking me, well, where's Juwan Johnson? Where's Foster Moreau? And it's like, well, Juwan Johnson was on the field for 62 snaps of that game. He's blocking, right? Like that's how do you help your offensive line? Well, you say, hey, tight ends, come over here, help out the left tackle, give a chip. And that makes it a little bit more difficult to get them out in the passing game. But yeah, that's going to be probably the X factor matchup, in my opinion, is the Packers defensive line, defensive front versus the Saints offensive line, because it could be a real long day for them.
It could be a long day for the Packers too, because on their offensive line, Bakhtiari, who knows if he'll play this week? We have no idea what's going on. Like, is the knee really that bad, or was this just I'm not playing on turf? And that's how we're going to play this all year, because he's been very vocal about the turf. After his guy Rodgers got hurt, he was all over social media complaining about it again. He hurt his knee on turf on top of that. So we'll see how this plays out. Now it's at Lambeau. So if it is a turf thing, I'm hoping he's going to play at left tackle. Elton Jenkins, their next best lineman at left guard, who can play all 5 positions. It looks like he has a sprained MCL, so he's going to be out for several weeks, it sounds like. So they won't have him at left guard, which means they're going to have to make a change there. And then Aaron Jones, who this offense is pretty much based around, I would say, at this point with Jordan Love at quarterback. He didn't play last week. They still had a chance to win, but A.J. Dillon, as big as he is, should be a lot more difficult to take to the ground than he is on a consistent basis. And then behind that, you've got Patrick Taylor, who's been in the Packers practice squad for a couple of years and getting some time. Eugene Wilson is a guy that is a rookie that led all of the NFL in preseason rushing, I believe. And he got a couple of snaps, I guess, in the last game behind A.J. Dillon. So if Aaron Jones can't go, and he's coming off of a hamstring, just like Christian Watson, their number 1 wide receiver who hasn't played this year still because of a hamstring. If Jones can't go, that's going to be even a bigger problem for the Packers, because then there's really not as much of a threat of a run, and you have some inexperience on that offensive line to go with it. I get concerned. How good is that Saints front 7 that the Packers are going to have to deal with?
Yeah, so that's another, it's weird. It's hard to gauge through 2 weeks, because it's like, okay, are you just facing really shoddy offensive lines, or are these guys really flashing? And, Carl Granderson was a guy who all throughout camp, we saw him making splash plays and getting to the quarterback. And it was always like, yeah, but he's going up against Trevor Penning every day. And I'm not sure if Trevor Penning is very good. So maybe that's just a bad sign. And he's going to get shut down by NFL left tackles when he gets out there. Well, that has not been the case through 2 weeks. I think he has 2.5 sacks. He's just been a constant pest in the backfield. He forced a fumble that really saved Derek Carr's bacon in this game. Derek Carr had a really ugly interception. 3 plays later, Carl Granderson gets the ball back. And so, we've been waiting for the Saints to put a guy across from Cam Jordan who can make life easier on him. He's still great. He's older, but he's still getting the job done. He's facing double teams on almost every snap with Marcus Davenport out there. He had a half sack through the entire season last year. And it just was not getting the job done. And Carl Granderson took that starting job from him as a UDFA out of Wyoming. He's just been getting better and better every year. So he's the guy that has really been the X factor for the Saints. They rebuilt the interior. So Nathan Shepard had a really good game this past week. Colin Saunders is the guy from Kansas City. He's just a run-stuffing D tackle. He's a guy you need to have on the defensive line. And then the first rounder, Brian Brzee, has been very good. He's more of a pass downs player right now, but he's got a heck of a spin move. He actually ended the season of one of the Texans' offensive linemen because he just his spin move was so vicious. He tore something. And so that's been a highlight of this group because we know the secondary is good. You know about Marshawn Lattimore. Paulson Adebo has been really solid. Alante Taylor has been solid in the slot in his second year. You got Tyrann Mathieu back there. So you knew that group was going to be a strength of this team, but it's all complementary, right? Even the best secondaries in the league, you can only cover for so long. If the quarterback is just able to stand there and pick you apart, it's going to happen. And so you need a pass rush that can get there with 4 guys, and the Saints have it right now. Now, again, it's like they've faced 2 really questionable offensive line groups. Will they be as effective when they go up against some of the better offensive lines in the league? I don't know. But for now, Carl Granderson is the guy who has been wrecking the offense through these first 2 games.
Yeah, Jordan Love's had clean pockets so far, whether it be preseason or now. He's had clean pockets, and that's the one thing that Packer fans want to see. When that doesn't happen and he gets some pressure on him over and over, how does he kind of react to that? And you talk about how good your secondary is, and I don't disagree. This Packer wide receiving core is young, really, really young. I mean, the most experienced wide receivers are Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs. Watson hasn't played. I don't know if he'll play this week, but he missed part of last year. Why? Hamstring. And Romeo Doubs, he also missed part of last year. He was hurt. So even the most experienced guys on this team still have not played a full season of football. Either one of them played a full season last year. And then you've got rookies behind them. And I'll say this much. As young as they are, a wide receiver and tight end, because Luke Musgrave, I think, is going to be a Pro Bowl type tight end at some point. But they are faster and more athletic than they've ever been since I've been watching the Packers. And I've been watching the Packers since, I don't know, back to the Lynn Dickey era. This is by far the fastest team I've seen, the most athletic team I've seen at wide receiver and tight end. I think 2024 will be the year that this all comes together after these guys all get a full season of experience of playing with one another and playing with Jordan Love. Because, when Rodgers got into that team, he had all vets around him, Donald Driver and all these guys were already there. And he was the new piece. Here, Jordan Love knows the offense better than anybody in the wide receiver or tight end room. So he's constantly having to teach. If a wide receiver goes the wrong way, then it's, okay, dude, that's not how you're supposed to run that route. You're going to have to run it this way. But it'll be interesting because this will probably be their stiffest test from the aspect of the best secondary they faced to this point with these young wide receivers, and then how they go. I think the one thing that has really been confirmed for people that question Matt LaFleur is his ability to scheme guys open, his ability to run an offense. Because when Rodgers was here, he didn't want to do half of what LaFleur wanted to do. He hates motion. Well, they're running 72% of their plays. I think they're running motion on. That's 4th best in the NFL. Yeah. He loves motion. And so everything he's wanted to do, Jordan Love obviously is going, okay, coach, whatever you want to do, we're going to do it. So you're really starting to see now what LaFleur wants to do with this offense, where you never really got that chance with Rodgers. And he's proving himself with a guy that has only got a couple of starts, and this offense just continues to move the ball. That last game, they punted in the first quarter, and then they didn't punt again to the fourth quarter. Now, again, the offense there in the fourth quarter stalled a little bit with penalties and whatever the case may be. But second and third quarters, they were moving the ball up and down the field and couldn't be stopped from the Atlanta Falcons defense. from your perspective, Dennis Allen, strengths, weaknesses as a head coach. And, everybody Packer fans should remember he was a head coach before. So this isn't like this is a first-time head coach here. He's done it before. I'm sure he's learned a lot from the previous head coaching job and the Derek Carr connection, obviously. What do you take away from Dennis Allen?
Well, first things first, you mentioned Donald Driver. I loved those older Packers offenses. I remember James Jones, Greg Jennings, always loved those guys in fantasy. The way the Packers develop quarterbacks. I wish more teams did it the way they did it. And he's like, you can draft a guy in the first round and give him time, and then he gets on the field, he's ready to win. Right? I watched that game, most of that game against the Falcons, and then the plane took off, and I landed, and all of a sudden the Falcons won. And I was like, what happened? Anyway, but you ask about Dennis Allen, and year one, I think it was kind of weird because it felt like it was just an extension of the Sean Payton era, and they were trying to do that. They were trying to maintain continuity at basically every spot but head coach. It was basically the same coaching staff, basically the same roster. Jameis Winston was the quarterback, right? Pete Carmichael was the play caller. And this year, they've made a concerted effort to make this team more in his image. You brought in Derek Carr, a guy he drafted with the Raiders back in 2014. Obviously, they know each other well. They hired Joe Woods as defensive coordinator, Marcus Robertson as the secondary coach. These are both guys he worked with in Oakland. Todd Grantham's the defensive line coach. He's new. Zach Strief, Sean Payton poached a couple coaches, and so you had to fill those spots too, offensive line coach, stuff like that. But what I think what you've seen this year is he just seems more confident. He seems more like the head coach and not just a placeholder. And so when I think what you're getting from that is the team feels like that. The team feels more cohesive. You're not seeing a lot of those kind of, untucked errors, right? The errors that are made because the guy just didn't look ready. You're seeing it looks more prepared to win, and that's why you can win some of these close games. The margin is so thin that it's tough to know when you get on the right side of it, but then you end up winning 16, 15 games, and you're like, okay, that's it. That's where we want it to be. And so I would say his strengths so far have been, allow Pete Carmichael to coach this offense. I think that's when you get into trouble with head coaches that are on one side of the ball or the other, right? Whether you're the offense coordinator or the defensive coordinator, it's when you are not willing to, just delegate labor. You want to be in control of everything, but you can't be. There's just too much stuff going on. You have to trust the people you hire to do those things. And I'm not sure he was doing that last year as well as he could have. This year, I think he is. And I think Pete Carmichael has much more control over the offense. The defense looks like it's more in line. And that's what I think, when you have Dennis Allen, his strength should be, this is a team that plays really clean football. It's just, he is a very, detail-oriented person, and this should be a detail-oriented team. Well, it wasn't last year. They made mistake after mistake. Every game, it felt like we were talking about, well, if they did this, if they didn't make this stupid error, if Mark Ingram didn't run out of bounds a yard before the first down, they win this game. Well, those are the things that have gone right this year. So to me, that's the strength of Dennis Allen, is this is a very tightly run ship. Things are going the right way. People are doing things the right way. Other than Chris Olave, again, spiking the ball when he wasn't down.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. That's the type of stuff that shouldn't be happening.
Yeah, no doubt. I got two more for you, one of which will be the prediction at the end for the game, obviously. What about this division? My kid, 16-year-old, has been a Falcons fan since second grade, third grade. Liked Harry Douglas on the Madden video game. Got him a Harry Douglas jersey all those years ago and has been a Falcons fan all the way through. He about died when they blew the 28-3 lead to the Patriots in the Super Bowl. That was a disaster. That's the name of his fantasy football team, is 28-3. So he's a big Falcons fan. So I follow a lot of Falcons. We had D'Orlando Ledbetter on last week on the Curtin Long podcast. I've known D'Orlando a long time. He worked at the Journal Sentinel here in Milwaukee. So I'm really in on the Falcons. I'm not in at all on Desmond Ridder at quarterback. So when I look at this division, I just say best quarterback is Carr, and that's the way I'm going. And I think it's the best defense too. The Saints defense is probably the best too. Falcons spent a bunch of money. I get it on the defensive side of the ball. I still pick the Saints to win this division, and maybe the Falcons win 8 or 9 games, but I still think it's the Saints at this point. When you look at this division, how do you see it?
Well, I can tell you, I didn't expect the 3 2-0 teams.
Right.
I probably the Saints don't necessarily surprise me. That week 1 win That was a tough game. I always expected them to beat up on Bryce Young. It's just very difficult for rookies to win. And so I don't see them being a factor this year. Maybe, he'll be playing better later in the year, and they might be a spoiler for some of these teams when he starts kind of picking it up. But rookie quarterbacks lose. It's just the way it is. Yep. They lose a lot of games. You do not see rookie quarterbacks win. Even guys like Peyton Manning. Go look at Peyton Manning's rookie season.
Hey, man, I'm a Colts fan. I lived through it. I went to the Colts-Chargers game back in the day between Ryan Leaf and Peyton Manning. My buddy goes, "This is the worst football game I've ever been to in my life. Why did you bring me to this crap?" And he was very unhappy, and I had to buy him drinks that night. But yeah, so I lived through the Manning year. But you're right. He was god-awful. Threw a ton of interceptions. Looked like there was no chance he was going to be any good. And then he makes that big jump year 1 to year 2, like you say. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, rookies struggle. It's just a point that's like even in number 1 overall pick. Look at Trevor Lawrence. Look at Kyler Murray. These guys struggle. So I'm not worried about the Panthers in terms of competing to win the division this year. The Bucs are I think that Bears team might be real bad. I mean,
yes,
I'm starting to wonder if Justin Fields has regressed.
Did you hear about earlier today? I was on Twitter, and we're recording this here on Wednesday at about 12:36. So it may have happened while we're doing the podcast. Media gets to the Bears practice facility. Defensive coordinator's nowhere to be found. Alan Williams, no idea. They asked Everflus, "Hey man, where is he?" "Hey man, I don't want to really talk about that. Moving on." Okay, follow question. "Hey man, I can't really get into it." Or, dude, if they and I don't know if they fire that defensive coordinator and Getsy gets a say as offensive coordinator in Chicago, there are some big problems in Chicago at this point. But yes, I agree. The Bears team is brutal. Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, the Bucs beat the Bears. They did beat the Vikings, another team that just seems rudderless right now. They're 0-2. They won. They were 11-0 in 1-score games last year. I think they're 0-2 in 1-score games this year.
Yep.
But yeah, so I'm not sold on the Bucs yet. I think what you've seen out of the Falcons is real. I think they should be 1-1. I mean, the Packers had that game in hand and gave it away. But, I think that's what it's going to be to me is Saints, Falcons. And then, maybe the Bucs, maybe they can. That defense is real good. They kept it together. They still have playmakers on offense. Baker has done the job so far. So, another number 1 overall pick. But, it's tough for me to see that offense maintain throughout the course of the season. It's going to come down to these head-to-head matchups in the NFC South, I think. And, the Saints they get the Bucs in week 4. So that'll be a good litmus test for kind of where these teams stand against each other. But, my prediction going in was 10 wins for the Saints. They have a really soft schedule. They face every rookie quarterback. They get CJ Stroud, Beautiful. They get Anthony Richardson, they get Bryce Young again. In Jordan Love, right? Like, this is a guy who's in his third career. No, well, he's had starts before this year, but he's basically a rookie, in his third year in terms of time on task in NFL games. So, they've got a very favorable schedule of QB matchups. I think the best one they face is Trevor Lawrence. And so, yeah, I mean, if they can get out to like 3-0 without Alvin Kamara, I think you're feeling really good about their chance to get double-digit wins and get back to the playoffs. It feels like a lifetime since they've been in the playoffs because, the last time they were there, none of the fans were able to go to the games.
Right.
But yeah, I think this Saints team is going to start. They're going to hit a skid at some point. But I think Derek Carr is going to start playing better. The offensive line is going to start protecting better, and you're going to see a bit more cohesion from offense to defense. But I think this Saints team has a chance to give some teams some trouble. Are they a Super Bowl contender? Probably not. Any team can win it when they get there. I grew up a Giants fan. I know that better than anybody.
Sure.
But it's just for this team, it's like getting to the playoffs. You're on the dance floor. Anyone has a shot. And so that's where I think this team is focused right now. And I think they're going to get there.
You like the Saints against the Packers?
It's tough. I like Jordan Love a lot. The Saints have, I don't think they struggle against rookie quarterbacks per se. That's been the thing that people have said, but they're actually like 10-2 against rookie quarterbacks. They struggle against quarterbacks they haven't faced before, it seems. And especially guys who can move around. I think Jordan Love's going to give him some trouble. And if this offensive line can't get their act together, then it's, that's a tough environment to play in when the defense is getting sacks and the crowd is very, very loud. And So, I think it's going to be a one-score game. Either way, it's going to be close. It's going to be another rock fight. I think this secondary is really good, and I think they're gonna find a way to get it shut down. And if the Saints can run the ball, they win the game. If they can't run the ball, then I think the Packers take it.
He is Jeff Nowak. Very, very, very good. WWL New Orleans Saints sideline reporter. Follow him on Twitter at Jeff_Nowak. Jeff, thanks so much for coming on, man. Really appreciate it.
For sure. Thanks for having me.